everybody. I'm Lisanne Miller with W, Cushing and Company, and this is September's third Thursday with Lisanne, and we're going to talk about rocks. I hope everybody enjoyed the last video. Here's your rug hooking magazine, and we talked about the pattern insert of the maple leaf. So I hope you enjoy it. Please send in your creations that you create with it, and enjoy fall as we start it. Today we're going to talk about rocks. Rocks can stump a lot of people. They can be many different colors. They can be done with textured wool, with dyed wool, with anything you'd like. So first we're going to talk about rocks. This is the rock wall from the farm, and rocks do change color with season. Some rocks have mortar, some rocks don't. But in rocks, you can make that a gray tone, a gray and pink tone, a blue gray, even a brownish taupe, and I have some other examples. It's easy to follow rocks when you do the rule of 3, 5, or 7. But the first thing you have to pick is if there is mortar or space between the rocks, you need to pick a filler. The filler should not just be a solid black, it could be a dark brown. A texture works really well in here, especially if it picks up some other colors from the rocks. But before picking your color of rocks, you need to pick your mordant. Then you can pick your 3, 5, or 7. And once in a while, it's nice to hit in a rock that has a little bit of a gold fleck or a silver fleck to look like granite or the mica in a rock. Then you pick from there. Also, if you can combine your textured wool with dyed wool, and this is dyed, and then there's some textures in here. And don't forget, that gives us our depth of field. And once you pick what wools you like to be predominant, if there's large rocks or small rocks, and then you hook from there. The wool will do the rest of the work if your color choices fit in. The other thing that make rocks successful when you're starting it is what season are you doing. This is a fall season. The grasses are not as green. And you have to make sure within the rocks you put some grass. Because if you don't put the grass down in, this top layer becomes too flat. The rocks lose some shape and they lose some depth. So even if you sneak a loop or two in, it just adds to the depth of the rock wall. Another way to do a rock wall is with a dyed piece. And when you use a dyed piece allows you, this is just two dyed pieces. It allows you to give it a watercolor look. Now, these rocks I did not want heavy because it's the whole bottom border of this rug. So I used a couple of dyed pieces I had in my stash, and the rocks were not as delineated as on the rock wall, so I made my own rocks. And how I started to hook it is I put the goldish rocks in first, then I came in with the gray, which is Biddeford Pool, and I'll show you some ways to hook that later. And I put that in, then came in with one spot dye of a brown that had all these hues. And I did filter, like we talked about before, the rocks into the other rocks to give it a washed effect, not a heavy effect. And where I had put the grasses in, I also did that with the rocks. I feathered the rocks in. And sometimes you have to draw some rocks in or reshape the rocks to be how you would like them. But this gives you the overall rocky ledge, the rocky coast of Maine, without being as heavy, without being such a statement as the rock wall. Another way to do rocks, and there's a few different ways here, and this is a more primitive way, is to take your dark grays and to take a few black textures, and this is all old textured wool, and just, while this is a rock, the lighthouse is sitting on a rock, and of course this was a stone building, so I couldn't go with gray stones with the water. I had to go with black, black brown, and black gray. So some highlights were put in first, and then little pieces, puzzle pieces, were hooked in to make this rock coast that a gray building sits on. So this allows it to be substantial, not overpowering, and fits in. And I think that's the main thing you have to keep in mind. Your rock wall, while it can make a statement, it has to fit in with the rest of your rug and your color palette. What's next on my frame is an old rug. It is called Homecoming. This is a smaller version of our pattern. I'm doing the bigger one. But the maidens and the mermaid are sitting on a rock wall. So I have not started my rock wall yet, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you how I'm going to start it. Here is the rock wall. I am doing it in brighter colors. This is a rectangular rug. And the rock wall is not substantial, even in the bigger rug. But it is a bottom border. It does have the mortar in it. So how I start, and I'm just going to start at one end, and I'm going to pick about 5 colors. I want this to have a lot more motion because there's ocean here. So I'm just going to number. Now I have a 2 here, I'm going to put a 2 up here. I have a 4 up here, I'm going to put a 4 here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have a 1 here, a 1 here, 2 here, 2 here, 4 here, 4 here, and I'm going to put a 5 here. I'm going to come back here with 1, with 2, with 3, with 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's water. So it worked out perfectly. So I have labeled them. Now comes the choice of what do I want to put them in? What order do I want to put them in? I went back old school, and I went back into old wools. These are old wools. I have not decided, but I do believe that this is going to be my mordant. It's between these two, and I'll know in a little bit. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and most likely this will be 5, and this will be my mordant. So I have right here, and I will tag each of my wools, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be my mordant in between. It's a heather tone. It's got all different colors. It will pick up what I've put in. Since I have the green in the waves, I did pick a little bit of a green in as well. And each of these will be hooked in their numbers. I will put the mordant in first. Like we learned last month, with the veins, whatever you put in first recedes. So by putting the mordant in first, it will recede and not be as predominant. But as you can see, it will go with each piece and work perfectly. And I will post pictures as I hook this so that you can see them. So by picking my 5 colors, by making sure that they blend, I wanted something a little mossy with a green tint, a little bit more of a brown tint than a gray because I'm going to pop their dresses, a little more modern take on an old pattern. But I do want the rock wall to be there, but not heavy at all. And a lot of this is from reclaimed wool, recycled wool, and I wanted to keep it in that same note. I didn't want to go with dyed after I was using reclaimed wool. These are 2 skirts. So I kept the rock wall with reclaimed wool and use it that way. So they're my 5 choices. I've marked my wall and I know my 5 choices work with my mordant, and I'm good to go. Mordant first, then I hook. The order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this I look and see which rock is predominant. Number 3 is predominant. So I would probably want this as number 3. Number 1 is smaller pieces. This is a wider check, so I would make that a 1, that a 3, this a 2, 4, 5. So your order doesn't matter because they are scattered, but it's what you want to focus on. So there's my rock wall, there's my mordant, there's my numbering. And again, I'll keep you posted on this. All right, so let's do some choices for rocks. Some choices, Oyster Bay is a great choice for rocks, along with Country Hound. Now, Country Hound has a blue-gray feel to it, as you can see. So I might want to play up a blue-gray feel and bring in some dapple gray. And then I might want to bring in gray, gray, and more gray, but only use this part of the stripe. Maybe this would fit in someplace else. This is also a great texture to use if you want some moss in it, where this harvest can be used multiple ways. You can add a little yellow because of Country Hound. This could be your mordant. This could be the mossy rocks. So here's one set. You can do 3 like this. You can do 3 like this. You can do 3 like this. You can add 4 and 5 to it. I wouldn't go to 7. It gets a little busy, but this is a way to incorporate browns and grays and a little bit of mossy green. You can do it all in browns. You can do it all in grays. That's up to you. But this is one version of it. I like this version. When you pick your colors, make sure that you've got multiple colors, whether it's a texture or a dyed piece. As you can see, Oyster Bay has multiple colors that will pop off, and it will pop off when you hook them. The gray, this gray is a herringbone, so you do get lights and darks, so it's not solid. We're not using solid wools. Love this for it. You've got your mordant in a heather tone. Just like the heather tone I pulled out of Reclaimed, here's your heather tone, here's your mossy rocks, and you can, if you're doing brown rocks, you can add in a little gold. So this one piece gives you quite a bit flexibility with your rocks. And it's a good time to go into your stash and to look and see what you have in your stash in textures, and we'll do dyes in a minute. But to see what you have in your textures, and then you can mix in other wools into your stash and create a great rock wall. This is cobblestone. Cobblestone has that dotted effect, which looks like a lot of rocks, and this is tricky because you got to match it with a few colors. Now this does go together, and most people wouldn't put Oyster Bay with it. But when you do put Oyster Bay, these little bits of red and cream come out as well. So this will take on the color that it's next to. Cobblestone is good if you need that 3rd or 5th color. And if you need a 3rd or 5th color, cobblestone does take what's around it, so it's a good mixer in the mix. If I put Country Hound next to it, all of a sudden it goes from being less gray, less black, to being a lot more in the brownish. The browns come out. This almost looks like a dark brown now, but it will change if you put a gray next to it. It becomes more gray. So cobblestone is, if you're looking for that last color, it does absorb or take on the colors around it. This texture here by itself, stone wall, and it's called stone wall for a great reason. You can hook it just like a stone wall. Here you have the blue lines, and everybody's always afraid of this because of the blue lines. The blue lines actually give you direction, and you can cut this with the stripe this way. So you have 1, 2, you have your 2 colors, but when you hit the blue, don't take the blue out because the blue runs across both. You put that in and it adds differently each time, so it almost looks darker than how it appears in the stripe. But you still need one more color for your wall. Well, this is a good time for cobblestone to come in, because here comes cobblestone. And cobblestone, as we said, takes on what's around it. With the gray and with the taupe, some of it looks blue. It picks up the blue line. So this could be your 3rd color. and you can have the stone wall and cobblestone and make a stone wall. Now, if you don't have individual stones and you want to do a stone wall, if you were to hook this, cut it in its stripe, and hook it in puzzle pieces, you would equate to a stone wall. And it works very, very well that way. Only if you're doing light and bright stone walls would you use this piece. It's a little too light, it tones too light, but of course this stripe would work, this stripe would work. You just have to stay away from this stripe. So let's look at dyed wool. When you look at dyed wool to use in a stone wall, the spot dyes work. This is Hillside. Hillside is very reminiscent, it's just different, a little different color wave than what I used in the Nubble. And I just accented it because you can get rocks in this color wave, rocks in this color wave, and you also have the blue. So again, if you did a rock wall that didn't have a mordant in between, you could just make puzzle pieces onto the rock wall and cut and hook Hillside for a successful rock wall. But if you needed to add something to it, you could add in a little bit of Biddeford Pool. Biddeford Pool, although it appears lighter, does work in with Hillside for a rock wall. Biddeford Pool makes a great rock wall for a softer look, and you can combine dyed and textured. So if you think Biddeford Pool jumps too much, you can put in stone wall, and the two together make rocks. But again, if it's not, doesn't have the mordant, it's just a rock wall, you make puzzle pieces, you pull and hook, and Hillside will make it. Biddeford Pool will make a gray. You add in a little taupey. We could even add in, this is a good time to add in Country Hound to Biddeford Pool, and there you are with rocks. Sometimes we want a dramatic wall. We want that gold. We want a golden brown. Maybe the sun is hitting the rocks. This is where we probably wouldn't, this is Marigold Magic. We wouldn't use this end of it, but we may use it in the rug. But you would pick out pieces such as this, right into here. And sometimes a gold really warms a brown rock wall. And sometimes you need a gold in there to warm that gold. That gold will warm that brown rock wall. And you can pick out your pieces of it, but use these other pieces in the rug elsewhere to tie it in. So never discount a gold in your rock wall. This is Tobacco Row. This is for a dark row, or this also works for a mordant. I wanted to show you what a good mordant would look like. This goes from dark brown, a little bit of gray. It is overdyed on a texture, but all of the colors that you see here, you would just cut and hook, and the mordant would have the highs and lows. And it would accent anything that was around it without overpowering it. And it also works for tannish stone walls, brown stone walls, or gray. Because as you can see, it does work in between. And then you can put in Oyster Bay as a mordant. And all of a sudden, Oyster Bay isn't as gray. It's a little more brown. So when you're looking for a mordant, we don't want a solid color, but you do want a little bit of a statement. But you need the highs and lows because the rocks are not always airtight, and there'll be crevices, nooks, and crannies. And a piece like Tobacco Row lets you pick up the highs and lows and work it that way. Now, don't be afraid to use yarns. Yarns that are mixed, yarns that have all the colors that you like, they do accent your textures. Would this be used as a mordant? Sure, it wouldn't be as definitive. You could use it as a mordant for highs and lows, or you could use it like this as your third rock, and I'll go down this way where the gold isn't as predominant. You could use this as your third rock, and it would really work well. Or you could use it with Biddeford Pool. And here's your rocks. Every rock you use the yarn with will look very different, and you're changing the texture up on it to give it more depth. So that would also work very, very well. And how you see how this is going to hook, if you look down here, this is a little bit how it will hook, right down the center of it. And this is one of our hand-dyed art yarns. If you're doing a gray wall, you can use something like this, because in this skein, you have your grays for your stone, and you have your darker for your mordant, or vice versa. This can be stones, this could be mordant. So sometimes with the art yarns, in one skein, you can have stones and mordant, or 3 colors of stones or 2 colors of stones, combined with a dyed wool, makes a stunning stone wall. Last, texture rolls. When you're not doing a huge stone wall, and I mean a huge one, these, it's 1/8 of a yard each, but as you look into here, you get all the highs and lows, okay? You get all the textures in here, your darkest one, and this is a good way to roll your wool to see how they go. And here would be my mordant, most likely, and then I would pick my 3 colors. So this allows you to see everything that is in here, and you could use a lighter mordant right here. This happens to be cobblestone. So in here, in this roll, you could have everything you needed for a stone wall. And the other colors in there. So you could use these all. This could be your mordant, this could be your mordant, this was the darker color. So these rolls are really great to get a stone wall in. And it works, there's enough of each color, and you get everything you need in one roll. So that really concludes stone walls. It concludes how we're going to do it. I will keep you posted on my homecoming. Textures, dyed wool, yarns, texture rolls. They work really, really well. And it's up to you what your rug calls for and how your rug is outlined. But most importantly, what you want to achieve. Do you want it to be a primitive? Do you want it to be like a real rock wall? This is your choice. Or do you want it to look like we have with the Nubble in a watercolor effect? So here's the 3 ways to hook them without fear of a stone wall, and hopefully your stone wall will look excellent when you hook it. So that concludes our 3rd Thursday for September. In October we have a surprise, and I'm not going to reveal it, but let's just say Lisanne will be in the dye kitchen for October's 3rd Thursday, and maybe we'll create some different things for you to look at. So have a great rest of your month. Be well, stay well, and until next month, have a great time hooking.